So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Alumni Insights from the Great Recession. I'm Michelle Marks-Hook, the Alumni Volunteer Program Director of the Green Center for Career Education and Connections. I'm really pleased to welcome 4 alumni from the classes of 2008 and 2009 to offer some lessons they learned during the Great Recession that may help you find your way through this economic downturn and any others you might face during your career. Before we go ahead and introduce our panelists, I just have some housekeeping. Joe Testani, the Career Center's Executive Director, will be moderating this panel. If you want to go to your settings up in the corner and put on speaker view, that should allow you to see the individual that's actually speaking to be highlighted, since this is more just a Zoom meeting. We will have everyone on mute other than our panelists, and we'll be taking questions from you guys in the Zoom chat room. So if you want to send those directly to the host, Michelle Marks-Hook, then I can distribute those to the panelists. Feel free to type in any questions you have for the panelists throughout the program, and we'll try our best to get to them all. Also, if you can type in your first and last name as well as the class year in the chat, and again, send that directly to me. And then that way we can facilitate, we'll have a better idea of who the audience is, and we can facilitate a stronger discussion that can benefit everyone who's on the call. So right now, I'm going to put myself on mute and just monitor the chat box while Joe introduces our panelists. Again, if you want to keep your videos off so that it's not distracting, and we're not too sure with so many people on the call if that's going to interfere with the technology side of things. So if you can keep your video off, keep yourself on mute, and just put your questions in the chat box and send them directly to the host, Michelle Marks-Hook. So I will turn it over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Great to be with everyone today. Thank you to our alumni for joining us for this conversation. As Michelle said, I'm the Executive Director of the Green Center here at the University of Rochester. I've been at U of R for the last 5 years, and we've been working very hard to respond to COVID-19 and find ways for us to really support students and our alumni throughout this crisis. We wanted to do this because we thought it was really important to hear from folks that might have been impacted by our last recession that we had, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and also kind of get some tips from them for what they experienced, and maybe some advice for our current students, but also some of our young alums that might be negatively or significantly impacted by the economic downturn that we are possibly and most likely going into the next couple of years. So this is very much a hot topic for me, and I think something very interesting, and I'm really excited to be joined by just a great group of people. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I think that's always the best way to have our alumni be able to speak. So I'm going to kick it over to Asher. Asher, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit, maybe your major as well as your graduation year and what you currently do right now?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to meet you. My name is Asher Perzigian. I graduated in 2009, double majored in political science and socioeconomic anthropology, which was a create your own major, a lot of fun. It's been a long time since I've thought about that, so thank you, Joe, for the reminder. I'm based out of Chicago now. I work in consulting, where I focus on hospital and healthcare payers, helping them simplify and personalize the consumer digital experience. So thinking about that transition from in-person facility to on-the-go to at-home care. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a wild ride over the last 10 years, and look forward to sharing some perspective with you.
Asher, thanks so much for being with us. And I think you were one of the first alums I met when I started at U of R when I was doing my tour of the city. So thanks. It's good to see you again, and thanks for being here with us today. Next, Mia, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Mia Comrie. I graduated in 2008 with my bachelor's in psychology. And since then, I am now based here in Washington, D.C., and I work for the federal government. I work for the Department of Justice, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, a mouthful. I work and assist state, local, and tribal law enforcement across the country in a wide variety of issues. Currently, I'm right now leading the efforts to provide assistance and guidance to law enforcement on responding to COVID-19. So this is also very near and very close to the work that I'm doing now. And I'm extremely grateful to be sitting on such a distinguished panel. So thank you.
Mia, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Yorda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Yorda Yenenh. I graduated from the U of R in 2009. I majored in political science and religion, and I am now working as a associate at Simpson, Thacher, and Bartlett, which is a law firm in the New York City office. And I work in the corporate group doing private equity fund formation, and have been there since I graduated law school in 2015.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. And last but definitely not least, Kat, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Katherine Nguyen-Martinez, class of 2008, graduated with a BA in Health and Society when it was brand new compared to what it is now. Currently working as a clinical research coordinator at Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center for prostate cancer. So we will eventually start doing research on cancer patients with COVID. And I am based out in New York City right now. Ever since 2011, I've been working at MSK. Before that, when I graduated, I worked in Cornell, still in New York City.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat, for being with us. And I think we'll be tackling a variety of questions throughout the day, and we'll obviously be getting some questions from the participants. But I'd love to just start with, if you can flash back 10 years or so when you were still a graduating student from U of R. I'd love to hear about what your feelings were around graduating in sort of an uncertain time back then, and what some of your first destinations were, but also what some of the goals you had, and how was that disrupted by what was happening in the economy at the time. And Mia, I was hoping maybe we could start with you, and if you could talk a little bit about sort of your state of mind, but also I think sort of how that changed maybe or influenced some of your plans.
Absolutely. So to be honest, I was terrified. It was a very scary time, especially thinking about what I wanted to do when I graduated, and thinking about the money that was attached with that. Initially, I wanted to go to medical school, and I was really unsure about what I wanted to do. And so, which is a really great turn of fate, is that I actually went to the Career Center, and I spoke with a career counselor about kind of what should I do? What is some of the advice? And I ended up making the decision to take a year off. And they actually connected me with an alum in the Rochester area that worked at a neuro-ophthalmologist office. And so they made that introduction. In a crazy day, in a fit of my being terrified, I actually went and did an interview. Initially, when the position was offered to me, it was a free position as an intern, which is always a great experience, but it's sometimes a little difficult from the financial side. And probably within a month of graduating, they were able to offer me a daily rate, a rate that helped sustain me a little bit. And so I did that for a year, which was a really fabulous experience, because it also showed me that I did not want to go into medical school. Hence why I'm now working with law enforcement. But it was a very scary time. And I will say, being able to go to the Career Center and speak with somebody that was not, as closely related to me, to kind of help give me some advice was beneficial to kind of where I am today.
Thank you so much, Mia. Yorda, where were you in this sort of stage in 2000? You were graduating in 2009, so things were evolving as you were leaving, but so how did this impact you?
Yeah, things were sort of even more volatile in 2009 and uncertain. I had decided during college that I wanted to do some type of a service program after graduating. Had thought about the Peace Corps, had thought about AmeriCorps, and probably about a couple months into senior year had committed to the Peace Corps and went through the application process. Was really happy with the decision. It guaranteed that I had 2 years to be, doing service work outside of the country, and, was able to sort of defer, making any long-term, career plans after that. But during the time that I was in the Peace Corps, I still studied for the LSAT, took the LSAT, knowing that I wanted to go to law school afterwards. So sort of took time off, but still used the time to move forward and do what I ended up doing now.
Thanks so much. And Kat, as you were graduating in 2008, were there certain plans that you had that might got disrupted, or did you kind of power through some of the ideas that you had and kind of enter the market?
So funny enough, when we had, when I was still a senior, we had a job fair and I got an interview with MSK, which is where I was now, and I got denied. So I was a little discouraged. And so I just kept applying. I was like, I'm going to be in healthcare. I'm going to stay there. So I applied to Cornell. I was on monster.com. I don't think we had LinkedIn back then. I went to Craigslist, which was very desperate. But I stuck to what I knew and I just kept applying, and I went to my friends because they were in healthcare. So yeah, I just couldn't stop giving up. And then eventually someone called me from Cornell. It was a call center. It wasn't that great, but they did pay decent and their benefits were great. So I said, let me just get my foot in the door. 2 years later, MSK actually recruited me because we're down the block, and now I work for MSK. So, I mean, I wasn't going to give up no matter what because I needed income. But, I had to, luckily now we have like Millionaire Collective and other things to reach the alumni. But back in the day, I don't think we had that. And, I just stuck to my friends and who I knew and my connections and kept powering through.
It's great. I think we often talk about persistence and resilience as sort of critical characteristics in these kinds of markets, and I'm sure we'll hear more about those and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Asher, graduating in 2009 as well. Where were you, and how did this kind of disrupt or impact some of your plans?
Great question. The previous three panelists just nailed them, and I think it comes down to just being creative and reframing how to approach a problem. As Yorda mentioned, when we were approaching our senior year, we graduated in 2009. So September of 2008, when we came back as seniors to campus, is when the financial crisis hit. So from Lehman Brothers being no more to the collapse and consolidation of so many across Wall Street, those that were looking to go into iBanking had to reframe that and say, great, if I didn't have an internship before, who else does finance? Well, Coke, Pampers, everyone else still does it, and you just have to rethink about how you're applying that for what your first job is. I was looking at consulting, and all firms had shut down their fall recruiting. So it became, well, what is consulting? What's problem solving? Great. Who else is problem solving? What internal firms have consulting or different approaches? So it just became about how can I speak with as many people as possible to A, figure out who's hiring, and then B, try to make a close enough match where my first job out of college could, as Kat said, keep the lights on, be engaging, keep you intellectually stimulated, and get that, experience to further your ambitions and advancement.
Thank you so much for all those insights. And Asher, I want to stick with you a little bit and kind of fast forward now to 2020. And all of you represent very different industries in terms of what you do and the areas that you work in. Do you see parallels between what's happening now and what's potentially might impact the economy and the job market to what's happened in 2008, 2009? Or are there things that you see as distinctly different and have maybe different ramifications on what might be possible for the job seekers or seniors or juniors or maybe young alumni that are impacted?
That's the trillion-dollar question, truly. I do see a phenomenal amount of similarities, and I think the where we bridge off right now is the fact that from both a technical perspective as well as a more humanistic aspect, we are so much more advanced than where we were in 2009. I mean, if you think about just the fact that we're on Zoom right now, I imagine the vast majority of us have a smartphone, let alone, I remember the first iPhone came out when, Yorda and I were juniors, right? That's crazy to think about. And just seeing that transition from us in college from, BlackBerry to smartphones, and now seeing the transition to what does the future for workforce look like? I am extremely bullish that COVID will be unfortunate circumstances, but will be the pivot to radically change how the workforce looks, how it's configured, how we telecommute, how we engage our internal colleagues as well as clients, whether it's law with Yorda, whether it's myself with in consulting. And I think that level of engagement and our ability as this group to retool and relearn a different way to approach collaboration, I think will make everyone on this call so much more successful and ready for whatever's to come. And I don't think any of us can say exactly what will come, or when things will translate back to the new normal, but I do believe it won't look like it did today.
That's great insight, thank you. Mia, working on the government sector, how do you think there are parallels or differences from now to 2008, 2009?
I think a lot of it, I would agree with what Asher said. He said it eloquently. I think at times the federal government has been behind in some of the technology, as well as, teleworking. And so I do think that one thing similar to what Asher said is that we're learning now that most jobs, at least within the government, can be done remote. And so I think that is changing the way things are. I do also agree that I think that is going to be kind of a lasting change in the sense of retooling, rethinking about the way that we collaborate, the way that we think about projects, the way we even think about travel and the need for some of those travel or the need for in-person. And I'm not suggesting that, travel is going to go away, but just thinking about how can we problem solve, be creative in the way we're handling it. And I can say, at least in the federal government, we are actually starting to think about that and to kind of move towards that. We're not always as creative as the private industry, but we are slowly starting to move that way. But I think technology is going to be the big piece that we're going to see kind of shifting. I think the other piece is we're also starting to see different industries pop up and a need for them. Just in my little world around policing, we're starting to see a lot of stuff when it comes to smart technology. That was not something that was normally discussed, 3, 5, 10 years ago. And so I think we're starting to see a kind of a shift in the way those industries are and the need for some of the people who are able to do that, the engineers and the software developers. And so just from my little bit of world, that's what I'm seeing.
Great stuff, Mia. Thank you. Kat, obviously working in healthcare, a lot happening, disruption in healthcare from so many different angles. How do you see some similarities to 2008, 2009 and some differences?
Differences is we found out most of us can do our job at home, unless we're a doctor, but there is telemedicine. Difference, I think we're in a tough spot because majority of us are put on pause, which is what we are called in New York. So we can't move, we can't go anywhere. We can only do what we can through Zoom, which is a great thing. But the difference is we don't know when we're gonna be unpaused. We don't know when we're gonna really go back to normal. I have a friend actually in Florida. She's a PA and she's furloughed at the moment. I thought she would be the last person to stop working, but at the moment it makes sense because we're not doing elective procedures, we're not doing surgeries that are not necessary, but we are advancing to the point where we are still interviewing through Zoom and through phone interviews, and we, like Mia and Asher said, there are different things that we are looking for, like technology, IT personnel, other frontline workers, more med students that we want, residencies, fellows. So it's a hit or miss. It's a bittersweet situation, I think. In research, it's a big push because now we get to research COVID versus, in my case, cancer patients and how to advance in that. So it depends on where we are, who we are, and like what institution you're in. But healthcare just got pushed to the top in a way that, everyone's looking at it differently, more on an epidemic, pandemic, health and society, which is what I studied. So it's coming more to light compared to just Medicare, healthcare, payments like that. So that's a good thing.
Thank you. And Yorda, anything that you want to add or the differences, similarities from 2008, 2009?
The only thing I would add is that I think, looking back to 2008, 2009 is helpful now in terms of what opportunities you're looking at. So when I was graduating from law school and looking for a law firm position, I went back and studied what the law firms I was looking at dealt with in 2008 and 2009 and how they approached the downturn then. to see if there were, layoffs or, salary cuts or however they dealt with that and what their approach was, if they cut partner profits or what it looked like. And that was a helpful thing to see. And I, have been seeing it now in the legal market now, how they're dealing with bringing in new associates and doing virtual summer associate positions and still hiring people, but other firms have been cutting back and doing different things. So I think looking back to the way that things were handled in 2008, 2009, when this happened before sort of is helpful.
Yorda, that's a great segue to one of the questions we got from our audience. So I think the question is, what kind of advice do you have for communicating with employers right now? So a number of people that are on are in the midst of their job searches, right? Or they might be transitioning or were transitioning to different jobs. Is there advice you would give to a senior or a young alum that might be in that process to how they should follow up with employers or how they should be or stay in communication with employers? And Yorda, if you want to start on maybe some piece of advice on that front.
Yeah, I think just open communication is the best thing, and making sure that you're staying in touch with employers and making sure that you're available. I think it will depend on the industry and the employers, how they're dealing with this situation, but making sure that you're flexible to the extent that you can be, and being as available and being clear about what you're looking for and what you need is probably the most important.
Sure. What are your thoughts? Obviously, from the consulting industry, it's a little different in terms of when recruiting is done. But obviously, there's interns that are starting, and there might be evaluation of new hires that are coming on board. What's some advice maybe to give to people that are in the midst of their job search?
Two things I would add to what Yorda said are, number one, over prepare, and in that vein, don't come with questions that you can Google. And I say that half laughing, but I'm very serious. We say that Google can answer everything, but the reality is it can't when it comes to complex questions that involve something personal about you, right? And I think that helps inform kind of the second aspect, which is know your brand. What are you bringing to the table? I think if you don't have that crisp, while also enable flexibility for the situation, it's going to be very unclear, especially in a virtual environment, what you bring to the table, how you fit into the culture of the firm, how you would collaborate with the colleagues that you're being hired into. And I think if you don't have that confirmed brand of who you are, what you bring, how you relate, and how you can interact, I think it's going to be more difficult for them to review not only how you would fit in, but how you can be a high value candidate over time.
That's great advice, Asher. Thank you. Kat, would you add anything to Asher and Yorda's perspective on that, on what advice to give current job seekers?
I think they pretty much hit it on the nose, but also keep yourself active. There's a lot of online courses that are going on for free that you can just keep furthering your education and making sure that, your employer or whoever you're applying for knows that you're still interested and you're still trying to make the best worth out of this whole situation. And don't be afraid to email like HR or whoever you met with in the past if you're in the middle of interviews, just to get an update, because they're actively doing that now too. Like they're just making sure everyone's still up to date, making sure that, they're still looking, because after this is all died down or done, in the end, they're still going to need someone and new hires as well. So don't be shy.
Thank you so much. There's a question around if a student has an option to pursue sort of an alternative option like AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, and obviously those things are under sort of evaluation right now in terms of their availability and ability to participate in those things. But Yorda, if I'm not mistaken, I think were you in the Peace Corps after you graduated U of R?
Yes.
So would you like to talk about like maybe how evaluating that consideration now and sort of in the wake of what's happening, what some of the factors were in you deciding to go to Peace Corps, and what advice you might give someone that maybe is evaluating a more of a service-oriented alternative path to a full-time, maybe structured job role, but pursuing something like AmeriCorps Vista or Peace Corps, things like that?
Yeah, I I mean, I wanted to do some type of service project, and there are a lot of options. Again, as Joe said, it depends right now what's available and how that would work. But it was important for me to take some time off. I felt like I was very busy for 4 years of high school and 4 years of college and was ready to do something completely different. I also really wanted to be able to focus on something volunteer related for a significant amount of time and immerse myself in another culture and learn a new language and hone some different skills, knowing that I still did want to go to law school, and allowed myself to take the time during the service position to study for the LSAT and decide that I did definitely want to go to law school, but met with people and talked to people during that time to make sure that it's what I wanted to do. I think it's valuable to have experiences that are not necessarily exactly on the path of what you might want to do. Well, I think, internships like Mia did are really helpful to maybe confirm that you don't want to do something. That's really great. And it's also, equally great to do something completely different and get a different experience. I really enjoyed my time in the Peace Corps. And it was difficult, and it taught me a lot of things that were, maybe not exactly applicable to law school or what I do now, but were, incredibly valuable.
Yeah, we were on a call earlier today with a tech partner that we have that posts opportunities for students, and they said one of the still areas that are maintaining growth in terms of job postings are nonprofit sector, because obviously there's a massive need in some communities for support in those areas. Mia, I was wondering if you wanted to add anything to Yorda's comments around pursuing these kinds of experiences right now and sort of our current landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Yorda. I think internships and taking opportunities like that are valuable. When I was done with my year off, I ended up going to grad school for a year for criminal justice. And so when I graduated in 2010, although it's still not kind of technically part of the Great Recession, it was still really difficult to kind of get jobs. And I think one of the things that I found is that, you have to balance out wanting to get kind of that dream job, so to speak, that versus, what do you need at this moment and how can you do something in that area? So, I knew that I wanted to work on policy, but I was unable to get jobs in that area just because there wasn't anything open. So I ended up taking a job with a local agency with their humane law enforcement agency. So it was different. I never thought I would do something like that, but it was something that I did short term, and I ended up it was a wonderful experience. And I think I was able to do that while I continued to look. And, thankfully, a couple months later, I was able to get one of the jobs that I had with Department of Justice. So I think it's kind of valuable. You learn something from every single experience that you have, good or bad, but you do learn something from that. And so you're able to kind of take that with you and build on it as you move forward.
Thanks so much, Mia. I don't know, Asher or Kat, did you have anything you want to add to either of those? Just wanted to check in with you. Kat, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about specifically what skills you think are most critical for graduating students or young alums that are in the job market to really emphasize right now. So obviously it's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that are shifting and changing. Are there certain skills or competencies that you would point to that you think are important for students or young alums to highlight and really emphasize as they go through the market?
I'm guessing now tech savvy, if we're going to be doing this for a couple months, just being able to be flexible as well. And just, flexible I say because for my job, I'm actually very pregnant right now, very pregnant. If I wasn't, we were going to be redeployed. So we were going to work in a different section in the hospital, even though we're not trained or if that's not under our job description. Being flexible, open-minded, open to new experiences, even if it's not what you're exactly looking for. Like I'm in clinical research, but I also wanted to do hospital administration, which is what I did before this. But if you're willing to go into a different sector and just, learn that first and then get pushed or, apply to something else after, that's good. Just being well-rounded as well, just do what you did in Rochester or what you're doing now. I'm pretty sure you guys are doing a whole lot more than we have with the multiple classes you're doing online. So I think you're already in a good start. I took grad courses after Rochester and it seemed like a piece of cake compared to Rochester. So I think everyone's in a good position. Just be open-minded, flexible. Don't be afraid to ask any questions, to communicate, to reach out to alum as well, and use Melior Collective because we're here to help as well. So I think that's the main points at this point, because we're in a pretty weird and unique situation.
For sure. Thank you for that. Congratulations, by the way, too. Asher, what are your thoughts on that? What's maybe some skills or competencies that students can emphasize? And I think for either if they're undergraduates or graduate students or really kind of anywhere they are as in sort of the process of the market, are there certain things to emphasize?
I mean, I think she nailed the last question. I think what I would add to that is being highly communicative. I think is going to be an incredibly important skill for all of us for the next 40 years of our career, right? I think as technology becomes more embedded in everything we do, and the automation train moves from RPA to machine learning to AI, right up that curve, there's going to be a lot of skill changes that will manifest themselves in the marketplace. And I think that's true with the vast majority of positions, both professional as well as service. So I think pulling from our Rochester education and essentially being super well-rounded, but more egg-shaped where we're not going to fall off the table, I think is going to be a phenomenal skill that we all can bring to whatever we're doing. I think convergence is real, so being an expert in a lot of things, I think is going to be important. And what I mean by convergence is, to use healthcare, which is where I work, we're seeing across industries, people invest hundreds of millions of dollars in healthcare. Whether it's folks like CVS and retail that was purchased by Aetna, whether we have everything that Walmart and Best Buy and all the telcos are doing with remote monitoring, it's phenomenal. Fundamental statistic, 72% of Fortune 500 companies are meaningfully investing in healthcare, meaningfully investing meaning over $100 million a year. That's a staggering amount, and that's adjusted for non-healthcare companies. So that's over 80%. If you look at that number, that's true in every single major industry category. So what does that mean? Very similar to the jobs of today will not be the jobs of tomorrow. Skills of today will not be the skills of tomorrow. I think the one thing that is true is our ability to connect with people and be able to own the narrative of conversations and projects and programs and just whatever you do execution-wise, I think is going to be critical.
Great insight, Asher. I think whenever I talk to alumni, I feel like one of the things they emphasize is the way U of R's curriculum is structured to allow for sort of exploration in a lot of different spaces, kind of almost prepares them for this reality of working, and especially what your point is it's going to continue that convergence process, right? There's going to be a lot of intersectionality between different industry sectors, and I think that's only going to grow in the years to come. Mia, what are your thoughts on sort of the skills to emphasize, I think, for some graduates?
I don't know if I can add anything to what Kat and Asher said. I think the one thing that I would just say in addition to what Kat and Asher said is around that balance between persistence and patience. Because a lot of people, I think one of the difficulties is that, a lot of people right now are teleworking, they're working from home, or they're paused, as Kat said, but also recognize that even if they are working, that they're also dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of stress. And so the companies, the employers may not be as responsive because the employers themselves may not be as responsive. So just balancing out that persistence and that patience as you're working with those employers through the job, through the resume, submitting your resume and preparing for that interview. That would be the only other thing that I would add in addition to what they said.
Thanks so much, Mia. Yorda, there's some questions around majors and how that might be maybe differently received in the workplace or in the job market. Do you have any thoughts on if there really is any difference when it comes to like what your major is and how that might either positively or maybe negatively impact, or if there are certain things that students should emphasize when they're going through the process, regardless of what their major is?
I think it depends. If you have gone to grad school, then your grad school education will sometimes usually matter more than what you majored in college. But I would say similar to what Asher said, it's really about being able to market yourself and to be able to create a brand and a narrative around what you're bringing to the table. So regardless of what your major is, being able to figure out how to explain, sort of have a very succinct marketing deck about yourself is the most helpful and probably the most productive. So I think it doesn't necessarily, obviously there are some majors that are going to be hit more than others or industries now, but it just, being creative and being able to create a narrative is probably going to help you the most.
Thanks so much, Yorda. Asher, I want to go back to you regarding, and this will be maybe a challenging question for you, maybe from some of you to tackle. I think your perspective in consulting might lend itself well, but there's a lot happening and changing regarding the international student market, right? Obviously with some immigration changes that might be forthcoming in the future, but do you have any advice? Some of the questions that came in for, we have a lot of international students, both at the undergraduate and graduate. Do you have any advice for maybe international students of how they can weather some of the uncertainty that's happening right now around the job market, especially for international students?
Phenomenal question. Truthfully, I don't know. I think the same principles, though, should apply as we think about where we want to land, right? If our goal is to end up in X country, whether that's America or other, finding a firm that will sponsor you to stay would obviously be critical. If that is your primary goal over working in X industry or X job function, then finding that type of firm that will sponsor you should be priority number one, and it's early enough in your career that you can figure out how to pivot, right? If it's more important to go work in X job, X function, whatever, then if the sponsorship situations don't enable you to stay, then I think you'll need to be creative in looking at what else is on the horizon. So I think regardless of, I guess, path forward, figuring out what your priorities are and executing against them, I think is key. And then beyond that is remaining flexible.
Thanks, Asher. Mia, Yorda, Kat, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add around advice or insights for international students. So I'll step in here because obviously this is something that we're looking at on a regular basis from the Green Center. I think one of the Asher kind of hits it on the nose in that most of what we would recommend for international students to do is the same thing we would recommend for any students to do. Some of the advice you've already given, being persistent, being flexible and adaptable, being really overly communicative and engaging with alumni and folks in different industry sectors, I think are really key. Where are the industry sectors that are active right now that are maybe experiencing really big recruiting booms, not only in the United States, but maybe globally, and where that might look in other countries. I think we have an amazing international alumni base. That's that were students that are still in the States, and all those that have moved to other parts of the world. I'm sure our panelists know plenty of classmates that are spread out in different countries all over the world doing amazing things. So I think those are really critical. And unfortunately, with the immigration sort of process as it is, it's really staying in close communication with the International Student Office here at the U of R to monitor what those changes might be over the coming weeks and months. And I think it's very much a moving target, I think, with some of those shifts that might be impacting green cards and work authorizations. So I think it's important that we stay in close lockstep with some of the folks on campus in order to navigate and at least understand what some of those shifts might be in the next few months. Asher, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to be rude.
No, not at all. That's all.
But I think one of the things that I want to throw out there as well is if history is any type of precursor, what we've seen in every single downturn for the last 100 years is that whenever we get to the upside of it, the investment in the boom is phenomenal, right? So if we look at the past 10 years since, the four of us graduated, just from a stock market perspective, it's more than, we're talking about doubled. That's phenomenal, right? So even if you look at where we currently are today versus 2019 or 2009, we're still riding high more than we could even dream of back then. If you cascade that down to every industry, whether it's public or private and in the stock market, the growth that they have had and the innovation that they have executed on in the past decade has been incredible. So I do believe that when we get to the other side of this, again, we don't know when that is going to be, maybe that's months, maybe that's 12 months. The job surge will be big and it will be huge. So I think maintaining that anticipation while you're making sure that you're progressing your story, and you can show, no matter what it is over the next X months, that you meaningfully did something to progress your mind and your participation and your growth, I think you'll be wildly successful. And beyond that, don't underestimate the power of internal referrals. Like to a degree, we pay for our schools, not just for what we've learned, but because of our networks, right? Getting an internal reference is the biggest difference you can possibly imagine, right? So many firms right now, the first level of review, and this is true for small and big firms alike, is all automated, right? You are not getting a personal review unless you have an internal reference. I hate to break it to you, but that's the truth. So what does that mean? Use the amazing X thousand of number of alums we have across the world and figure out where they work, and do not submit a blind application. That could be the silliest thing that we all do at any stage of our career. So Joe, tell me if I'm crazy, and if that's not the advice you've given people, please autocorrect me. But I would still disagree with that and say get an internal reference.
I appreciate your honesty about disagreeing with me. No, but I completely agree with you. I think that is, we started the MELIAR Collective with alumni relations a couple of years ago, I think, because we saw an appetite among our alumni to really want to engage with our students and each other, to really support each other. And I think our community of University of Rochester is so strong. And I think there's many people that want to lend a hand to each other. And I think that's really important. And I think, Kat, you've alluded to this in a couple of your comments around the network and the community. Maybe you can identify some people that you felt were really important to you as you were going through either your job search and when you graduated, or even now. Who are people in your network that maybe you leaned on to really help you, and in what ways did they really support or impact some of your job search?
Well, for me, I was very close with members that I was in our student groups. So I kept in touch with them, and they were actually stemming out from healthcare to education, but we always kept in close contact. So building that network with them, they knew their friends and they pulled me into what they knew. We didn't have the MELIAR Collective, so we weren't active in that. But now I can say currently the MELIAR Collective has helped other students, current students, because they've contacted me prior to COVID, and we spoke through Messenger, and we were supposed to actually do a tour with me through MSK, but this hit and we weren't able to do it. But I still keep in contact with them just in case something pops up. One was in the middle of an interview session and she hasn't heard back, but I'm pretty sure she will hear back sooner rather than later, maybe end of May. But I was very persistent in meeting people and networking, which is why I'm here now as well. And I've been doing it for years. So that's what I've been doing. I mean, you can't be shy in this process either. You can't be shy and not reach out to the person that seems like the person that you really want to shadow at all, because that person could be the person, like Asher said, your internal referral, the person that pulls you into that position that you really wanted. Even though you've never met face-to-face, Zoom is good, and even through Messenger, because you never know what opportunity might come about that, you know?
Thanks, Kat. Mia, what were some people that were influential for you? And there's a question in the chat as well. If you don't know someone, how do you actually even broach some of that, or that initial interaction with an alum that maybe is really eager to help you out, but maybe you never met them before? So what's a way to broach that? So take it away.
So to the first piece, I would say, I mean, I found, especially at the beginning when I was getting ready to graduate, that the Career Center and like Kat said, the people that I had interacted with through the student groups were kind of the best people to help me kind of navigate and help through the process. I would say that they've still continued to kind of assist, even if my career is very different than I think what a lot of people do from University of Rochester. There's still a lot of techniques and tips that are useful when it comes to interviewing, developing your resume, that still bouncing those ideas off and getting advice from that network. And so I think the student groups have been invaluable in the sense of the friends and the colleagues that have been created through that. To the second question, I think if you're using something like the Melior Collective, I think the best thing is that just sending a simple message. You're already halfway there with the alums that have elected to join the Melior Collective. They're interested and eager, and they want to help based on what they can do through, if you're interested in doing informational interviews, or what Kat was talking about with, meeting up for coffee, doing tours. So it's just something as simple as giving a little bit, a sentence or two about yourself and what you're interested in. And I would say the biggest thing to think about when you're reaching out is just to kind of keep an open mind. And when you are reaching out to the alums, because sometimes you may look at just a job title and not truly understand what that person's title is. And so just being open-minded to start those conversations. I think when you're doing more of a cold call, so maybe outside of Melior Collective, you found out that there's potentially a connection with somebody, to Asher's point, at a company, and you just want to kind of cold call, you get their contact info. I think one way is, especially in this age, not to go dark, but when we're talking about phishing and scams, sometimes to kind of throw in that connection in terms of how you know that person. And whether that connection is the University of Rochester, or you were a part of the same group at U of R, or you went to the same networking events. I highly encourage everyone to take part in any sort of networking events, even if they're virtual, because those are invaluable. But I think being upfront on your expectations, and again, being open-minded, are kind of the key things that I would say when you're reaching out.
Thank you so much, Mia. Yorda, any other things you want to add, or people that were really influential to you as you've been going through your career?
The same things as what everyone has said. I mean, reaching out to people I knew from student organizations, friends of friends, people who knew each other, through college or after college was really helpful. I think people are really, willing to and excited to help people from the U of R. And, when I've gotten cold call requests from people, I've been really excited to talk to people and help them any way that I can. So I, like people said, don't be shy and be polite but persistent, and that should hopefully work.
Well, I'd like to wrap up our time by maybe having each of you share maybe one piece of advice that you think is really kind of important for folks to keep in mind as they're going through this experience. And obviously each of you have talked about sort of being optimistic and sort of relying on communities. But I don't know if, Yorda, let's start with you since we're here with you. Is there one piece of advice you'd like to give to students that are either in the job market right now, or maybe even juniors or sophomores that might be joining us, about what the future may hold for them?
I would say to, like we've said, be creative, to think outside of the box, to realize that you don't need to have the job that you might have for a long period of time right away, and to see what else you might be interested in, or what else is something that you could, be involved in the meantime. And also being really true to yourself and recognizing exactly what you need and what you're looking for from, a financial perspective, from a mental stimulation perspective, and what's interesting to you. Those would be my top things.
Thanks. Kat, what do you think? What's one piece of advice you'd like to share with our audience before we head out?
Be patient. This is all going to end eventually, and be persistent. Follow your goals, whatever you're looking for. Just don't give up too easily, because in the end, it'll all work out the way it's supposed to. And we're all in here to help you as well if you need it.
Thanks, Kat. Asher?
Use the time well to prep for interviews and figure out what you want to do. It's a beautiful gift in terms of more time to prepare, and those that prepare will typically, at least from my perspective, outperform others from a first impression perspective. And then the other piece of advice I would give, whether it's now or throughout your career, is build your personal board of directors, because those folks that you lean on, whether they're colleagues to coaches to mentors to anyone in between, are going to be pivotal for your success.
Thanks, Asher. Great piece of advice. Mia?
I think a couple of pieces, I agree with what everyone has said. I think leaning on your network, like if it's your board of directors, but leaning on them, even if it's something as simple as asking for them to look at your resume, or to set up a Zoom call and do an interview with you. That's the key thing I would say. The other piece I would say is similar to what everyone has said about using your time wisely, is also there's a lot of free courses out there now. There's a lot of free content. So also using that to explore and, kind of peek in some of the, just like you've done at U of R, peek into some of those areas or those fields. Try to find those wins, because it is hard if day after day you're applying and you get no word or you get rejections. It's trying to kind of find those wins, because yes, it is, the sun will in a sense come out in the end, but kind of finding those like mini wins will be important.
Much, Mia. I really just want to thank all four of you for all the insight and the time and the advice, and really more importantly, probably than anything else, the care I think you have for the University of Rochester and other alumni and students to give some time and advice and insights. I think you've fulfilled my expectation always of how great U of R alumni are and how much they really are so passionate about the institution, but also compassionate about our community as a whole. So I really just appreciate all of this advice and insights and experiences that you were able to share with us today. And I'll end with Michelle put some items in the chat area that we've referenced and talked about throughout our conversation. The Melior Collective, there's resources on the Green Center website that really are kind of addressing some of the topics that our panelists touched upon. How do you kind of connect to a network? Where do you find these people? How do you approach some of these? What maybe skills can you develop or are important to do over the next few months if you have that time to be able to do that, as well as people that are actually actively hiring, which I think is really an important piece of this, because I think each of our panelists said there is opportunity happening, and it's being able to pivot and adapt to some of where the opportunities might present themselves in the coming weeks and months. So I really appreciate and thank you on behalf of the Green Center and on the Office of Alumni Relations, as well as the entire University of Rochester for the time and the insights. So thank you so much for the time, and I hope the participants really got a lot out of this conversation, which is also recorded for be able to review later at a later date. But thank you all. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.